Hi, I'm Garmrig1, and this is Midgardia's cool crowdfunding show. I'm here today with Jeff Barber. How's it going?
It's going great. Happy to be here.
I'm glad. I'm happy to have you. You're here today to talk about Blue Planet, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Blue Planet. We're doing a new edition of, I guess it's classic. If age is the thing that makes things classic, role playing game. It's hard science fiction set on Earth's first colony planet, a water world called Poseidon. There is a mining based gold rush going on as the inhabitants vie for a substance called Long John, which is feeding a genetic revolution, including longevity treatments. So people are basically have the option to become immortal. So there's a lot of money involved to support the colony effort. It really focuses on the world building and the rich ecology of the planet. There's a lot of environmental themes, a lot of anti-colonial themes, as the newcomers to the planet are fighting over the resource, and the original colonists who have sort of adopted the world are trying to keep it protected. And that's sort of where the players find themselves, is in the midst of that sort of global conflict.
Right, because there's like two major waves of colonization, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
The original colonists come basically as a scientific mission. There's 5,000 genetically engineered colonists. There's a agricultural blight that occurs on Earth that causes essentially a 75-year uh, crisis where the resources being focused on trying to keep people alive on Earth and not really support the colony. And as a result, the colony is abandoned. Several generations later, scientific mission returns and finds that the 5,000 colonists have become 80,000 souls. And they feel as though they are the natives of the planet, that it is their world. And so there is a second wave of colonization that begins, but then really accelerates when the xenosilicate is found and this gold rush begins.
That's awesome. I like that a lot.
It's got a very intentional sort of Wild West feel. It's got very intentional um, tensions around rights to land and ecological protection and environmental themes and anti-colonial themes. And it gives players the opportunity to sort of get involved in any aspect of that story in a way that interests their table.
Yeah, that's a very good succinct description. So there's been a lot of changes to Blue Planet over the years. This is the third edition. Is that
Third
correct?
edition.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. It is. Speaking of genetics, someone who knows second edition well would be able to sort of trace some of the mechanical. Uh, I don't want to call them themes or structures because they've evolved, but they're still there. Like the bits that we were trying to go for with the second edition mechanics exist in a more nuanced sort of movement towards the more narrative end of the spectrum, but it's still mechanically scaffolded enough to really support the hard science of the setting. And I feel like that is probably the biggest intention behind the mechanics, and there's enough familiarity there that people would recognize it. But there's a whole new mechanic set for people that either are new to the game or that are looking for a fresh update of the old game.
Right. How complex would you describe the new system as being?
I would put it at sort of mid complexity. It's certainly not a Blades in the Dark or a Power by the Apocalypse, but it's very far from a D&D as well. There are characters can be made in just a few minutes if you want to. If you want to make a more sophisticated, more elaborate representation, you can spend more time creating your skill sets and background. But it plays very smoothly. Getting the core mechanic down is a quick explanation, and players can uh, really kind of that core mechanics is runs throughout the game. So once players have that down, they really don't have much trouble tracking on how the mechanics work.
Right. Different aspects like social encounters versus combat are not wildly different.
No, they all combat, of course, in role playing games tends to get sort of most of the focus, but the mechanics for combat, besides weapons and damage, are the same mechanics that get used in the rest of Blue Planet. We lean on an idea called maneuvers. So whenever there's opposition to what you're doing, you kind of choose from three different approaches, and the opposition has three counter approaches, and then you use whatever skill sets you think are most appropriate to pursue that approach. And we don't define all of the maneuvers. We list some of the ones that are available, like vehicle maneuvers, because those are common in RPGs, or hand-to-hand maneuvers. Those are common in RPGs. But there's a hacking maneuver that we describe. There's social maneuvers. You're trying to deceive, persuade, convince, and those are, or sorry, intimidate. And those are examples of the kinds of maneuvers that we emphasize. But they all use the mechanic and the core skill sets the same way.
Right. I like that. That sounds really cool. So why don't you tell me a little bit about dolphins? I can see one shooting a laser at something and destroying it.
Yeah. um, so it's a weird point. A lot of people find the fact that we have uplifted cetaceans in the game a little weird. It's a big part of the backstory. It's a water world. I'm a marine biology teacher by training, so it feels like kind of a natural fit for me. It does take folks a little time to maybe get used to playing them as characters, but they are a big part of the setting. And though not always parts of a game, um, I have run lots of games with player characters that are cetaceans. The the thing I think that most people struggle with is this idea that, well, I'm always in the water. How can I really be involved in that brawl in the tavern? How can I be involved when I'm at the negotiation at the corporate headquarters, or how can I be the getaway driver when we do the heist? Um, the technology of Blue Planet is pretty advanced and ubiquitous, and cetaceans interact with the terrestrial world through telepresence, so they can absolutely be the driver. They just operate the car remotely, or the aircraft, or what have you. Um, in fact, one of the games that I run frequently at conventions has a uh, pilot whale pilot known as Hotshot, and he's getting getting to see people engage with those kind of characters in games like that is super fun.
I like the pilot whale pilot. That's good.
Yeah. Well, there's a cultural aspect to the cetaceans where they tend to name themselves either by what they do as an occupation or as some version of a pun around that. So, a pilot whale becoming a pilot, and naming themselves after sort of traditional pilot names is kind of a no-brainer.
Right. I mean, I just finished listening to the audiobook version of David Brin's Startide Rising like 2 weeks ago, so I could manage a dolphin.
Yeah, for sure.
What an absolute work of art. But anyway, uh, can you tell me a little bit about the campaign archetypes?
Yeah, we had one sort of consistent complaint about the Blue Planet game over the years, and it was that the setting was a little bit overwhelming. It's sort of the focus of the book, right? My passion is in world building, and 90% of the text that's been produced for the game is about the setting, and so it's sometimes hard for someone to pick a thread and create a campaign out of it to find their way to a story that they want to tell, either because there's so much they want to do, or because it just sort of stops them in their tracks. But either way, that's the same struggle. So in the new edition, we are taking a note from old games that used to provide examples of all the characters you could play. We're going to provide examples of not all, but many of the campaign threads that you could follow. So there'll be these 2,500 word mini setups. They would provide some basic plot structure, some hooks to engage the characters, NPCs, some resources, um, all of the basic elements that go into the start of a campaign, so that people can use them to jumpstart their own stories and hopefully build campaigns out of those. And one of the things that we'll do is show at least what we see as the different kinds of stories that can be told, the different themes that can be focused on, and hopefully give people a better idea of how they can direct their own stories.
Right. I think that's an excellent addition. Honestly, I've read the most of the original Blue Planet, and yeah, no, I can definitely see how that would be an issue.
Yeah, we have a quick start guide that's available from drive-through. It's pay what you will, so it's free to download, and it has an example of one of those campaign archetypes in it called Red Sky Charters. It's actually based on the original sort of playtest campaign that I run off and on when working on Blue Planet, and it gives a good example of the kind of thing that we're planning on doing.
Right. I like that. I like that a lot. Also, the art for this is absolutely wonderful. By the way, you've got some really good people working on this.
Yeah, we're really excited. One of the best things I think about the third edition is that we're going to be able to really lean into the art. We didn't have enough of it in first edition. The second edition, black and white, arguably not the greatest. It got better in the supplements, but even that was all black and white. But being able to go full color and have choice of artists from all over the world, it's going to be a really gorgeous book. We're excited to make it really lush.
Yeah, yeah, and show off all of the weird stuff at the bottom of this alien sea.
Absolutely. I think one of our stretch goals is fully illustrating the field guide, and I'm really excited for that one to go.
Nice. Looking forward to that. So you have a section on the Kickstarter about how the themes of Blue Planet have become more and more relevant since its original publishing. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I. It's funny if you go back to the old reviews. It's a common thing that in the beginning they'll say, "Oh, I found this game and I kind of avoided it because it seemed like it was going to be all environmental and I didn't want those politics." And I guess I was always a little disappointed, given my own politics and my background as an ecologist. I felt like that was an important part of the game and one that everyone should care about. I mean, it's science fiction setting, sure, but our own world is um, a delicate one. Our own blue planet is a delicate one, and in the 90s, people knew about global warming, but it wasn't part of the everyday conversation that it is now. Certainly, people weren't talking about climate change in any kind of public way. I mean, there were certainly scientists who studied in school, um, it, but in terms of it being a driving force culturally and behind everyday conversation and politics, it really wasn't. Um, and so in this moment, all you got to do is turn on the television, look at social media, and it's there, and it's essentially existential, right? We are facing a decisions and investment of resources that have to be made if we want to be able to save this planet. And well, I guess that's overstating it. To save at least human culture anyway, the planet will still be here, and so it just seems like a really relevant time to be able to talk about those in a game and add our own very small voice to that chorus for a better stewardship. And I'm just really excited that the the reception of it seems to be much more positive this time around than it was originally.
Well said. I'm guessing that's a point that comes up a lot.
It's something that people have asked about, but it's a decision we made to lean into it. If people complained about it before or liked Blue Planet in spite of before, well, there's lots of games out there. If it's too environmental for you, then I guess you can play another game. We are leaning into it with the third edition, and we'll only be emphasizing it more if the World of Hurt stretch goal makes, and we get to talk more in depth about Earth. Then you can imagine it's going to lean heavily on what I believe will happen if we don't stop doing the things that we're doing. In fact, not even stop, but make very strong efforts to turn around.
Yeah, it's bad out there. So I take it you're not selling NFTs of all of the individual art pieces.
No, no. In fact, I had no idea that until somewhat recently that cryptocurrency and NFTs cost as much energy as they do. And it's just one. If all the dystopian things that I learned in 2020, that's near the top of the list.
Yeah, yeah. the So why don't you tell us a little bit about the quick start?
Yeah, we put out a quick start. Well, a lot longer ago than the gap between when we put it out and the launch of the Kickstarter ended up being a lot longer than we'd wanted. But I think the gap in people's lives from 2020 is a lot longer than people wanted as well. But there is a quick start guide. It's a bit of a monster. It's 80 pages long. It's pay what you will on drive-through RPG, which means it's downloadable for free. Contains all of the rules that you need to play. Contains setting introduction, gazetteer example, biotech equipment and creatures. There's a full demo scenario with pre-generated characters. So I'd encourage people to check it out if they're interested in what the new books are going to look like and some of the content that's going to be in them, or most specifically, the new mechanics. I think that if you combine that with, if you're new to Blue Planet, you can play it with just that. If you've got old versions of the books, you can use the setting material you have with the new rules there and get a real good taste of what the new game is going to be like. You can be off and running and playing before the new game is delivered. Speaking of that too, I wanted to emphasize that we are giving the old material, the old PDFs, to backers as soon as the campaign closes, really as a thank you for backing, as a chance to provide a little instant gratification to a Kickstarter, which is not always possible. And so I hope people could look forward to that and can dive right in with the quick start guide and that material if they want to.
Right, and the setting's still at like the same time frame that the old stuff
Yep.
was, so that's all still
Yeah, we're
workable.
choosing not to move it forward because we want to keep the same social political tensions that are so critical to what we see as the storytelling potential in the setting.
Right, I think that's a great decision. A lot of games kind of move it forward from what was interesting and kind of lose their focus.
Yeah, I've seen games do that, and I do know that people sometimes really like big changes in the setting, but we figured it would just take too much away from what has really been the enduring part of the game, which is its background and setting.
And shooting things with a laser while you're playing a dolphin.
Well, that's true. That's true. Always key. Dolphins with freaking lasers on their heads.
Well, this looks really cool. Like I said, I've looked at Blue Planet many times over the course of my tabletop experience, and I'm very glad to see it getting the new treatment it deserves.
Well, I certainly appreciate you having me on, and really appreciate the support of the game. I hope people are excited as we are.
Well, I mean, judging by the fact that you're funded in 4 hours,
Yeah.
I think they
Well,
think they
we got a lot of hardcore fans, and they did a lot to from the last 25 years, and they've done a lot to buoy us up and really launch us strong. And I deeply appreciate that.
uh buoy because it's aquatic
Oh
themed.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I meant to do that. I meant
yep,
to do
yep.
that.
Rising tide lifts all boats.
That's true.
And before I wander off into a series of cringy nautical puns, if you like this, if you like dolphins, if you like shooting laser beams at things, if you like cool social political tensions and environmental themes, go back Blue Planet Recontact. There's a link right below this video. Click it, look at it, look at the art, look at the dolphin shooting something with a laser, and think I could do that. Yeah, and again, thanks for coming on, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. Deeply appreciate it.
And for those of you at home, have a good night.